A few minutes before noon on the 24th of September 1869, in a small, packed trading room just off Wall Street, the price of gold stopped making sense. The room was called the Gold Room, and it existed to trade exactly one thing. On its wall, a mechanical indicator displayed the current price of $100 in gold, measured in paper dollars. For days that number had been climbing, 140, 145, 150, hauled upward by a buying force nobody could identify and nobody could stop. Brokers who had sold gold they did not own watched their ruin printed on the dial in real time. Men wept openly. The crowd spilled into the street, where thousands stood staring at the telegraph offices. What almost nobody in that room knew was that the buying force had a name, two names, and a plan of genuinely astonishing scope. Two men were attempting to buy all the gold in America, not a large position, not a dominant share. All of it, every ounce available for trade in the New York market, so that everyone who owed gold would have to buy it back from them, at whatever price they chose to name. And because there was exactly one institution on earth holding enough gold to break such a corner, the Treasury of the United States, their plan required something more audacious than money. It required capturing the financial policy of the American government itself, reaching into the White House through the president's own family and persuading Ulysses S. Grant to keep the Treasury's vaults shut while they squeezed a nation. For 3 weeks it worked. The price of American money was, in a meaningful sense, being set by two private citizens in New York, and the only body capable of overruling them had been talked, dined, and married into standing still. This is the story of the gold ring of 1869 of Jay Gould and Jim Fisk, the strangest partnership in the history of American money, of the brother-in-law, the bribed official, and the letter that unraveled everything, of the original American Black Friday, when the government finally opened the vault and the price collapsed in minutes, and of the most instructive part, which is what happened afterwards. To the men who did it, almost nothing at all. Along the way, we will answer the question this channel exists for. How does a corner actually work? And why did the men who ran this one understand, before anyone else, that the real game was never on the trading floor? It was in Washington. Start with why gold was traded at all. Because the gold room is extinct, and its logic needs rebuilding. Before the Civil War, American paper money was convertible. A dollar bill was a claim on gold, redeemable at the counter. The war broke that. To pay for it, the Union printed money pure and simple, the famous greenbacks, and suspended conversion. From 1862, America ran on two kinds of money at once. Gold, the real international money required for customs duties and foreign trade, and greenbacks, the domestic paper, worth whatever people believed the government's promises were worth. The two traded against each other, and the gap between them was the most watched number in American finance. When the Union lost battles, the greenback sank and gold soared. When it won, gold fell. After the war, the premium settled but did not vanish. In 1869, it took roughly 135 paper dollars to buy 100 gold dollars, and a whole marketplace, the gold room, existed to trade that gap. Understand who needed it. Every importer owed customs duties in gold. Every exporter, above all the merchants moving the great autumn grain harvest to Europe, was paid in gold-linked bills. Merchants bought and sold gold constantly to hedge, and speculators traded alongside them. It was, in effect, a market in the credibility of the United States, and it was small. The floating supply of actual gold available in New York was, by the best estimates, somewhere between $15 and $25 million worth. Hold that number, and now let us define the crime, because a corner is a precise machine, and this channel owes you the mechanism twice. To corner a market is to buy not just the available supply of a thing, but more than exists. You buy the physical supply. Then you keep buying promises, contracts from traders who sell you gold for future delivery, believing they can buy it back cheaper before the settlement date. These short sellers are, collectively, promising to deliver something that you already own all of. When settlement comes, they must buy from the only seller in the world, you. The price at that moment is not a market price. It is a ransom. Say it a second way, because everything turns on it. A short seller's loss is unlimited. He must deliver at any cost, and in a cornered market, the cost is chosen by his enemy. The corner does not profit from gold going up in the ordinary way. It profits from a manufactured moment in which a definite group of trapped men must pay any number you write on the board. It is less like investing than like buying every exit from a building and then charging for the doors. Corners on ordinary stocks happened regularly in that era. But gold was different in one terrifying, magnificent way. The floating supply was tiny, those 15-odd millions, while the United States Treasury sat on roughly 100 million in gold and sold a few million every month as routine policy. Any corner in gold could be shattered in an afternoon by a single government order to sell. The Treasury was not a participant in the market. It was the weather. Which means the gold ring's founding insight was this: a gold corner is not a financial operation. It is a political one. Buy the gold, yes, but first, arrange for the weather. Now the two men, because their partnership is one of the great odd couples of financial history. Jay Gould was in his early 30s, slight, dark, silent, tubercular, a man who spoke little, wrote less, and was already regarded by Wall Street with a fear that bordered on superstition. He had clawed his way from a poor upstate farm through the leather trade into railroads, and in the notorious Erie War had fought Cornelius Vanderbilt to a standstill, with tactics involving a printing press producing fresh Erie stock certificates approximately as needed, and judges purchased approximately as often. He controlled the Erie Railway. He thought in systems, silently, several moves ahead. James Fisk Jr. was his opposite in every visible particular. Fat, loud, jeweled, irrepressible, a former circus hand and traveling peddler who had bought himself the title of admiral by acquiring a steamboat line and a colonel's uniform to go with it, ran an opera house as his corporate headquarters, and lived in a blaze of showgirls, brass bands, and newspaper copy. New York adored him the way it adores its rogues. He supplied the noise, the nerve, and the public face. Gould supplied the design. Behind them stood the Erie machine, a railroad treasury they used as a war chest, and the friendship of Tammany Hall, whose judges could produce an injunction as fast as other men produced a handshake. Fresh from the Erie War, they were the two most notorious operators in America, and in the summer of 1869, Gould's silent attention settled on the gold premium. He had, it must be said, a cover story, and it was a good one, which is the first lesson of this episode taking shape. Gould argued, in public and in earnest, that a higher gold price was good for America. The reasoning: when gold is dear, the paper dollar is cheap. When the dollar is cheap, American wheat is cheap for European buyers. Cheap wheat means the great harvest moves, means freight for railroads, his railroad, hauling grain east, means prosperity for the Western farmer. Therefore, the government should let gold rise, and above all should not sell from the treasury and force it down. Notice what that argument is. It is not a lie exactly. The mechanism is real, and respectable men believed versions of it. It is a policy argument that happens to demand precisely the government inaction that a corner requires. Every scheme this channel has ever covered carries one of these: a public interest case that aligns, coincidentally, with the private position. The crop theory was the gold rings, and it was good enough to say to a president with a straight face. Which brings us to the family, and to the reason this episode belongs on a channel about money rather than one about politics. Every operator in New York understood that the Treasury controlled the gold price. What separated Good from all of them was that he treated that fact as an engineering problem with a solution, rather than as a wall. The others accepted the weather. He went looking for the man who said it. And here the structure of the American government in 1869 was almost an invitation. The decision to sell gold was not made by a committee, a board, or an independent institution with published minutes. It was made in practice by the Secretary of the Treasury in consultation with the President. Two men, informally, with no procedural insulation whatever between them and whoever happened to have their ear. There was no Federal Reserve to stand between politics and the money supply. That was still 44 years away. The most consequential financial lever in America was, in the most literal sense, attached to a dinner conversation. Good's insight was to find the shortest path to that conversation. Not a bribe, bribes are evidence, but a relationship, a family tie, and a share of the profits that made the intermediary a believer rather than an accomplice. Abel Rathbone Corbin was a 61-year-old speculator and fixer of long, quiet experience who had recently made the acquisition of his life. He had married Virginia Grant, the sister of the President of the United States. Good cultivated Corbin the way he did everything, patiently, generously, and with a ledger in mind. Corbin received, on extraordinarily comfortable terms, a position in gold worth some $1.5 million, carried by Good, on which the paper profits accumulated as the price rose. Nothing so crude as a bribe, merely an investment that made Corbin's enthusiasm for the crop theory deeply sincere. And Corbin delivered access. Through the summer of 1869, as Grant passed through New York, the new president found himself repeatedly in the company of Mr. Good and the remarkable Mr. Fisk, a box at Fisk's Opera House, a passage on Fisk's Fall River steamboat, dinners at Corbin's brownstone, and at each encounter, gently, the conversation turned to the currency, the harvest, and the wisdom of leaving gold alone. Grant deserves a moment of honest framing, because his role is the contested heart of this story. He was the most admired man in America, and among the least experienced in finance ever to hold the office. A soldier of transparent personal integrity whose besetting weakness, displayed again and again across his presidency, was loyalty to and naivety about the rich men who courted him. The historian's verdict then and since is broadly consistent, not corrupt but penetrable. The gold ring did not buy the president. They surrounded him with family, with hospitality, with a plausible theory, and for a crucial few weeks, it amounted to the same thing. The ring also attended to the machinery below the president. The assistant treasurer at New York, the official who physically executed Treasury gold sales, was due for replacement, and through Corbin's good offices the post went to General Daniel Butterfield, a war hero best remembered today for composing the bugle call taps. Butterfield received from Good a loan. He later insisted it was merely a loan of $10,000, roughly twice his annual salary, and thereafter kept the ring informed of the Treasury's intentions. An attempt to reach Grant's private secretary, Horace Porter, failed. Porter indignantly refused the position opened in his name. An account may also have been opened in the name of the First Lady, Julia Grant. The later congressional investigation heard testimony about it. The principals denied it, and the truth of that particular thread has never been established. We flag it and move on, because the proven machinery is damning enough. It is worth pausing on how the buying was actually conducted, because the operational craft is as impressive as the politics and is usually skipped. A corner has a structural problem. The moment the market realizes one buyer is accumulating, the price runs away before the position is complete, and every short becomes cautious. So the accumulation must be invisible. Good's solution was to spread his buying across a fan of brokerage houses. Smith, Good, Martin and Company was his own, but the orders also went through Heath and Company, through Belden and Company, through half a dozen others, with the brokers instructed not to reveal for whom they acted, and in several cases, unaware that the other houses were buying for the same principle. To the floor it looked like broad, healthy demand from many quarters. It was one man, wearing 8 hats. There was a second layer of concealment, and it was cleverer. Good also encouraged the shorts. If the market believed the Treasury was certain to sell and crush the price, more traders would sell gold forward, and every one of them was another future forced buyer. So while the ring bought quietly, the story circulating on the street was that gold was absurdly overpriced and due for a fall. The corner needed its victims to feel intelligent right up to the moment they were destroyed. That is not incidental to the design, it is the design. A corner without confident shorts is just an expensive pile of gold. And there was a third element, which is why the scheme could reach the size it did. Most of the buying was done on margin and credit, with the Erie Railway's treasury and a network of friendly banks, several of which Good and Fisk influenced or controlled, standing behind it. The ring's nominal position by late September was reported in the tens of millions, against a floating supply of perhaps 20. They had, in effect, promised to buy several times all the gold in New York, using money that was itself substantially borrowed. Leverage upon a captured referee. Remove any one of the three and the plan collapses, and in the end, the referee was the one that moved. By late August, the stage was set. Good began to buy, quietly, through a syndicate of brokers who did not know of each other, so that no single hand was visible. Gold stood near 132. Through early September, it crept upward as the ring absorbed the floating supply and began accumulating the promises of the shorts, who, seeing gold at absurd heights with the whole of Wall Street convinced the Treasury must soon sell, shorted it ever more heavily. Which was, of course, the trap. Every short was another prisoner who would someday need to buy. Then, in the middle of September, the plan began to wobble at its political end, and produced the letter on which the whole story turns. Grant, no fool for long, had grown uneasy. The pressure to keep the Treasury out of the market had become too insistent, from too predictable a direction. He remarked to his Treasury Secretary, George Boutwell, that something in the gold agitation smelled wrong, and his manner toward his brother-in-law's financial opinions cooled sharply. And in mid-September, from a Pennsylvania resort, Julia Grant wrote a letter to her sister-in-law, Corbin's wife, containing a sentence to this effect: "The president is very much distressed by your husband's speculations. Tell him to disengage at once." Corbin, receiving it, panicked, and made the fatal error of showing the letter to Good, begging to be bought out of his position with his profits intact. Put yourself behind Jay Good's quiet eyes at that moment. The letter told him everything. The White House was lost, the Treasury would sell, the corner was doomed. Every rule of partnership demanded he warn his confederates and retreat together. What he actually did has secured his place in the Black Museum of American Finance ever since. He told no one. He carried Corbin along with soothing words and a partial settlement to keep him silent. And while Fisk, kept entirely in the dark, bulled the market upward with theatrical public buying, roaring confidence at the gold room through his brokers, Good began, through other brokers, to sell. Quietly, steadily, into the very panic of short covering his own operation had created, and into the buying of his own partner. There is treachery, and then there is selling your corner to your co-conspirator. The gold ring's final days were a conspiracy of one man against everyone, including the other conspirator. Before the last day, 3 things about the world of 1869 need setting down, because they explain why a scheme this outrageous was even conceivable, and why it very nearly worked. The first is the gold room itself, which deserves a proper description because no institution like it exists now. It sat at the corner of William Street and Exchange Place in a building the traders called, without affection, the Coal Hole. Inside was a small amphitheater of tiered seats around a central fountain, a Cupid statue spouting water, of all things, into a basin, with the great price indicator mounted high on the wall, its numbers driven by a clerk in a booth. The noise was famously appalling. 150 men shouting bids at once in a room built for far fewer, the sound audible in the street. 2 features of that room matter for our story. First, its trades were cleared through a private clearinghouse that netted members' positions daily and required margin to be posted, which meant that, when the price moved violently, the calls for margin came within hours, not weeks, and men who could not find cash by afternoon were finished by evening. Second, the indicator on the wall was wired to telegraph offices across America, so the number in that little room was, functionally, the price of American money everywhere. A grain merchant in Chicago, a cotton factor in New Orleans, an importer in Boston, all of them priced their world off the dial in the Coal Hole. Corner that room, and you did not corner a market. You seized the country's unit of account. The second thing is the state of American finance in the 4th year after the Civil War, because the gold ring did not grow in normal soil. The war had ended with the government owing an unprecedented national debt, the currency untethered, and an entire generation of operators trained in wartime speculation, in which fortunes had been made on the telegraphed news of battles. Regulation, in any modern sense, did not exist. There was no Securities and Exchange Commission that lay 65 years in the future, after the crash our 1929 episode covers. There was no Federal Reserve. That was 44 years off, and it took the panic our 1907 episode describes to produce it. Corporate law was primitive. Insider trading was not a concept anyone had criminalized, and manipulation was regarded less as a crime than as a sport at which some men were better than others. Into that vacuum stepped the era's characteristic figure, the operator who understood that the rules were not merely weak but genuinely absent, and that the men enforcing them could be hired. Good and Fisk were not aberrations of the Gilded Age. They were its purest expression, arriving early. The third thing is the Erie War, because it is the rehearsal without which the gold ring makes no sense. In 1868, Cornelius Vanderbilt, the richest man in America and the most feared, set out to buy control of the Erie Railway, of which Good and Fisk were directors. Their response has entered legend. As fast as Vanderbilt bought Erie shares, they printed new ones. Convertible bonds were issued and converted. Tens of thousands of fresh certificates poured from the company's own press into Vanderbilt's buying, and the great man found himself trying to corner a stock whose supply his opponents controlled with a lever. When New York judges friendly to Vanderbilt issued injunctions, Good and Fisk fled across the Hudson to Jersey City with several $1 million in a carriage, fortified a hotel with cannon and armed men against the possibility of abduction, and directed operations from what the newspapers gleefully called Fort Taylor. Good then traveled to Albany with a satchel of money and secured legislation retroactively legalizing what they had done. That episode taught them 3 lessons they carried directly into 1869. That a corner can be defeated by anyone who controls supply, hence the necessity of controlling the treasury. That courts are an instrument, not a constraint, if you own the judges. and that a legislature can be purchased outright, which raised the natural question: why stop at a legislature? They had cornered the Erie. Now they proposed to corner the dollar. And note the escalation in their thinking. In 1868, they had bought a legislature to legalize what they had already done: reactive, defensive, cleaning up afterwards. In 1869, they set out to secure the government's decision in advance, before the position was even built. That is a different order of ambition, not corrupting the referee after the foul, but recruiting him before the match. So we arrive at Friday, the 24th of September, 1869, the day the name Black Friday entered the American vocabulary. Viewers of our British series will note the collision. London's Black Friday, the overrun Gurney Panic, had come just 3 years earlier. 2 countries, 3 years, 1 name, each marking the day a market discovered what stood behind it. The morning opened at 143 and went vertical. Fisk's brokers bid gold up through 150, 155, 160. His chief broker, a man named Albert Speyers, standing in the boiling crowd executing orders to buy millions upon millions at any price, orders Fisk would later blandly deny having given. The premium at 160 meant ruin for hundreds of trapped shorts. The crowd in and around the gold room grew so frantic that observers genuinely feared for lives. Business in grain and imports froze nationwide because nobody could price anything. Telegraph wires carried the delirium to every exchange in the country. In Washington, Grant and Boutwell conferred through the morning as the wires reported each new impossible print. Shortly before noon, the order went out, the one the whole scheme had existed to prevent. The Treasury of the United States would sell $4 million of gold at once. The news reached the gold room in minutes. The price did not decline, it ceased. Gold fell from the 160s to the 130s almost between ticks, a fall of nearly 30 points in roughly the time it takes to read this sentence. Men who had been ruined as shorts at 11 o'clock watched their tormentors ruined as longs at noon. Speyers, who had bought tens of millions at the top on Fisk's word, was left holding contracts worth catastrophically less than he had paid, and was widely reported to have been driven half out of his mind on the floor. The gold room that afternoon was described by witnesses in the language of a battlefield after the guns stopped. One consequence deserves its own moment, because it is the detail that turns a Wall Street story into a national one. The Gold Exchange's clearing house, the machinery that netted every member's trades and settled them, simply could not process what had happened. Contracts had been struck at 160 and at 133 within the same hour. Nobody could establish who owed what to whom, and thousands of trades were left in a state of formal limbo. The clearing house suspended operations. For days afterwards, the settlement of the New York gold market, and with it, a large part of American foreign trade financing, was frozen, not because the price was wrong, but because the record of who had promised what had ceased to be legible. That is a failure mode this channel has met before, in a different century. When a market moves far enough fast enough, the problem stops being valuation and becomes plumbing. The 2008 crisis had exactly this quality once the derivatives could not be netted. In 1869, the plumbing was clerks with ledgers, and it burst. The wreckage spread far beyond the room. Brokerage houses failed by the dozen. The stock market, infected by the panic, fell sharply in the following days, ruining operators who had never touched gold. The grain trade, the very farmers of the crop theory, was paralyzed for weeks by the pricing chaos, and the export season was damaged, not helped. As always in these stories, the circle of the burned extended far past the circle of the guilty. Clerks, country banks, commission men, the small shorts and small longs alike, none of whom had ever heard of Abel Corbin. And the guilty. Here is the part of the story that made it a founding legend of the Gilded Age. Good, who had sold through the collapse he foresaw, came out approximately unhurt by some accounts, richly ahead. The exact figure is unknowable and was much mythologized. Fisk, betrayed and buried under ruinous contracts, executed the simplest maneuver of all. He repudiated. The purchases, he declared, had been made by brokers exceeding their authority. Let the brokers bear them. Asked where the money had gone, he supplied the era with one of its immortal phrases. It had gone, he said, where the woodbine twineth. Erie's tame judges produced injunctions that froze every suit and settlement into a procedural swamp, from which nothing hostile ever emerged. The two men retired behind their lawyers, their Tammany friends and the walls of the Opera House, and paid, in any legal sense, nothing. Congress did what legislatures do when a scandal is too large to ignore and too well-connected to punish. It investigated. A committee under James Garfield, a future president examining the wreckage around a sitting one, took testimony through 1870 and produced a report that laid out the mechanism, the Corbin arrangement and the Butterfield loan in humiliating detail. Butterfield resigned. Corbin was destroyed as a public man and lived out his years in obscurity. The report pointedly cleared the president of corrupt participation while making his credulity uncomfortably plain, and Democrats mocked the majority for declining to summon Julia Grant or press the family thread. No one was prosecuted. There was, in truth, very little to prosecute with. Manipulating the gold market was not, in 1869, a defined crime. The acts were outrageous, the statutes were silent. If you have watched our Overend Gurney or Railway Mania episodes, you know this rhythm. The law arrives one disaster late every time. The afterlives complete the picture. Fisk never saw the reckoning of age. In 1872, he was shot dead on the staircase of a Manhattan hotel by a rival for the affections of his mistress. A finale so operatic that enormous crowds turned out for the funeral of a man who had helped engineer Black Friday 3 years before. Good went serenely on to greater things: Union Pacific, Western Union, an empire of rails and wires, and died in his bed in 1892, worth some $70 million, perhaps the most hated and least punished man in 19th century American finance. Grant was re-elected in a landslide. The lesson absorbed by every sharp operator in America was precise. The game was survivable, the profits keepable, and the referee reachable. The Gilded Age had received its founding demonstration. Before the lessons, two threads deserve closing, because the aftermath of 1869 shaped America more than the panic itself did. The first is what the gold ring did to Ulysses Grant, and threw him to the presidency. Grant survived Black Friday politically. The Garfield report cleared him. The country still loved the general, and he won a second term comfortably. But something in the episode set the template for everything that followed. His administration became the most scandal-ridden of the century. The Credit-Mobilier affair, in which Union Pacific insiders distributed shares to congressmen. The Whiskey Ring, in which distillers and revenue officials stole millions in tax. The Belknap affair, in which his own Secretary of War was found selling trading posts. In none of these was Grant personally enriched. In all of them, the pattern of 1869 repeated exactly. Honest man, dishonest intimates, a willingness to believe that people who were charming to him were also honest, and a fatal slowness to ask what a friend was actually selling. He learned the lesson too late and paid for it twice. After leaving office, he invested his entire fortune in a Wall Street partnership run by a young financier named Ferdinand Ward, the Madoff of his generation. Running a straightforward Ponzi scheme our earlier episode would recognize instantly. Ward's firm collapsed in 1884 and took every dollar Grant had. Bankrupt and dying of throat cancer, the old general spent his last year racing to finish his memoirs so his wife would have an income, and completed them days before his death. They are, by common agreement, the finest memoir any American president ever wrote, produced under a deadline set by mortality, and a debt created by exactly the kind of man who had first come at him through his brother-in-law in 1869. There is something almost unbearable in that arc. The gold ring was the first demonstration that Grant could not tell a financial predator from a friend. 15 years later, the same blindness cost him everything he had, and the country got a masterpiece out of his ruin. The second thread is the machinery that eventually grew where none existed. It is worth tracing, because the whole moral of this channel is that financial law is scar tissue. In 1869, there was nothing. No market regulator, no central bank, no criminal law of manipulation, no obligation on the Treasury to explain its operations. Every one of those absences was exploited by the ring, and every one was eventually filled, but slowly, and only after further disasters. The New York Gold Exchange itself withered when America returned to the gold standard in 1879, and the premium vanished. The room that had priced the country's money simply lost its reason to exist. The Federal Reserve arrived in 1913, after the Panic of 1907 demonstrated that a nation of that size could not keep relying on one private banker's balance sheet, a story we have told in full. Federal securities law, with its explicit prohibition of manipulative practices, arrived in 1933 and 1934, after the crash. Commodity market manipulation, the direct descendant of cornering, was not comprehensively addressed until the Commodity Exchange Act of 1936 and its successors. That is 67 years between the gold ring and a statute that squarely prohibited what it did. 6 decades in which the technique remained, in the main, legal. And when a comprehensive corner was finally attempted again on a comparable scale, the Hunt brothers' extraordinary bid to corner the world silver market in 1979 and 1980, the outcome told you exactly what had changed and what had not. The Hunts, like the ring, accumulated a colossal position. Like the ring, they were beaten not by other traders but by the rule setters, when the exchanges changed the margin rules against them, and the price collapsed on their own Silver Thursday. The referee, not the market, again decided it. The difference was that in 1980 the referee was independent, and there was no brother-in-law to reach. Now the lessons. So what should we take from the gold ring? 4 things. First, the corner's true lesson, which is about power, not markets. Good understood that no private fortune can outbuy a sovereign. The Treasury's vault made every purely financial gold corner impossible. So he did not play against the government's balance sheet. He played for the government's decision. The modern name for this is regulatory capture, and it remains the most profitable trade in existence because it converts the referee into an asset. Watch in any era for the fortune that is spent not on the market but on the weather, on access, family, plausible theories whispered to power. That is where the gold ring lives today, and it does not meet in a gold room. Second, every scheme carries a policy argument, and the crop theory is the eternal template, a genuine mechanism, sincerely arguable, which happens to require exactly the public decision the private position needs. The test is never whether the argument is clever. It is who, precisely, is positioned to profit if the argument wins. The answer in September 1869 was a list of brokerage accounts, and the arguer owned them. Third, there is no honor among manipulators, And the corner's finest irony is that its only truly protected participant was the man who betrayed it. A conspiracy is a market too, and inside it, information advantage rules exactly as it does outside. Fisk knew the plan. Good knew the plan was dead. Whoever knows the scheme is failing first wins, including against his friends. Anyone tempted to join a sure thing should price, honestly, the likelihood that they are not the insider. They are the exit liquidity of the insider. And fourth, the accountability gap. Between what the gold ring did and what any law of 1869 forbade lay open water, and through it the whole operation sailed home. We have met this gap in every century this channel covers. The overend directors acquitted, Hudson never charged, the pattern repeating until each era, scalded, legislates its specific scald. The machinery that would eventually police such things as securities law, market manipulation statutes, a central bank, was built piece by piece on the sites of these fires. In 1869, none of it existed, and the fire simply burned until it ran out of other people's money. The gold room itself is long gone. Gold resumed its place behind the dollar in 1879, and the premium that made the whole game possible vanished with it. Though viewers of our 1933 episode know that the American relationship with gold had stranger chapters still ahead. What remains is the template, the tiny market, the trapped shorts, the family door into power, the plausible theory, the betrayal, the vault thrown open, and the two men walking away whole. It has been reprinted, with local variations, in every generation since. They tried to buy all the money, and came within one worried sister's letter of succeeding. The most dangerous sentence in finance is not that the price is rising, it is that the government is with us. Sometimes it even is. The gold ring is the permanent record of what that costs everyone else. Sources and method. This account draws on the report and testimony of the Garfield Committee's congressional investigation of 1870 into the gold panic, contemporary reporting in the New York papers of September and October 1869, the recorded prices and mechanics of the New York Gold Exchange, the memoir and biographical literature on Good, Fisk, Grant, and Boutwell, and the standard scholarly histories of the episode and of Erie-era finance. Where the record is genuinely contested, above all how far Grant's household was financially entangled, the alleged account in the First Lady's name being asserted in testimony and denied by the principals, and the exact profit or loss with which Good emerged. This video reports the competing claims as claims. Figures for the floating gold supply, the Treasury's holdings, the price path and the scale of the wreckage are given as contemporaries and later historians record them, rounded rather than falsely precise.